from what I know, you guys have all been working on myths during your English lessons. And one of the things that some of you have gotten to do is write your own myth for Hercules' 13th labour. And so the rest of you that haven't have done some plans for it. So what I've done is I've done my own Hercules' 13th labour. So I'm going to read that to you now. Hercules' 13th labour. When men and women tell the story of Hercules, very few will tell you of the 13th and final labour. Perhaps because of the way it ended, or perhaps because of dishonesty and the lies that surrounded the story. Eurystheus, king, was a powerful man, and his kingdom ran on fear. The people of the kingdom did not disobey their king. They did not tarnish his name. What does it mean to tarnish someone's name?
Like tell them what to do.
Alice?
Cut it down like the reading.
Yes, it's kind of like when we're saying bad things about someone's name. If you tarnish someone's name, we're saying bad things about them. But they did not tarnish his name, and they lived by his rule. However, something changed when Hercules came to serve Eurystheus. Eurystheus had grown afraid of Hercules and his immense challenge and power. Blessed with enlarged muscles and cunning intelligence, the king knew that in battle Hercules could take over his kingdom. With each labour, Eurystheus had attempted to send Hercules to his death, and each time he returned, the king had become angered by his seeming immortality. What does it mean to be immortal?
It's like the person who doesn't really care what it says.
Right.
So like a god, lots of gods are mortals because you can't really be killed.
Exactly. Perfect. You can't die. If you're immortal, you do not die. So he's seeming to be immortal. But Eurystheus had one final task for Hercules. The king knew that before each task, Hercules had spent time in preparation. Hercules had practiced hunting deer for a whole year before bringing the hind to Serena. He had visited Eupolis, the priest, before attempting to overcome Cerberus. Who's Cerberus? Anyone remember?
I think it was a 9-headed serpent.
Fantastic. And what did he guard? Caden?
Like a marsh.
He guarded the gates of hell. Do you remember that one? So, Hercules may be a smart man, thought Eurystheus, but without planning and preparation, Hercules would surely fail. Eurystheus summoned Hercules to the palace of Taitoi, which existed in the centre of Athens. Amongst the grand podiums, formed of marble rock, Eurystheus slowly and cautiously approached Hercules. Hercules, my son, he began, opening his arms outward as he moved gradually closer to Hercules. You have shown nothing but success and perseverance. Perseverance means to keep trying in your tasks. Hercules stood unmoving. He was accepting Eurystheus' congratulations, but something felt wrong in the cold air. Something lingered around him, bad stench, bad smell. He had a feeling within him that told him something wasn't right. Please, Eurystheus continued, join me in Olympus Mountains tomorrow while we feast, celebrate and bask in your success. Eurystheus clapped his hands together and homed in his eyes on Hercules. Your debt is finally paid. Now Hercules was an intelligent man. He knew no weapon could replace the power of his instinct. What was an instinct? What's that? Sensitive, fantastic. But how long had Hercules been waiting for forgiveness? How hard has he worked to get rid of his past? Would Hercules not be a fool to miss this feast, to miss this celebration of forgiveness? Can someone remember what Hercules did that he wanted to be forgiven for?
He killed his cousin because his wife or mum, I think it was his mum, passed it.
That quiet was
Or maybe he got poisoned. I'm not sure, but
he was so crazy.
Then
he was sent into
and then he
madness.
thought all of his children were like spies and bad guys to try and kill him.
It's a bit like from Assassin's Creed with the dart, that if you shoot it, the guy goes on a rage and just goes up to his people and slices their heads off.
Right.
And then you're just like,
Murray. Right. So Hercules did climb that mountain that very winter morning. The air was ice cold, cutting through his throat with every breath. His hands were pale with exposure to the weather, his teeth chattering from the harsh winds that surrounded him. It wasn't until evening that Hercules finally reached halfway up Olympus mountain, where he was due to meet Eurystheus. The day had turned into darkness. Nothing but his flame torch illuminated the night. Hercules was caught in his daydream when somewhere in the night, Hercules heard a growl. It occurred so suddenly that Hercules dropped his flaming torch to the ground with a bang. The growl was unlike any sound he had heard before. It rumbled through the cold air, sending vibrations coursing through the rocks. Rocks began to shatter as tiny fragments went flying down the sides of the mountain. Hercules was caught off guard. He could hear the movement, but he could not see it. He felt the scales of a creature wrap around his neck. He awaited the creature to strangle him, but he did not move. With no weapons, he was defenseless. Hercules knew that he had been lied to by the king. The scales tightened. It felt like the tail of a giant lizard. He felt their cold, smooth, wet surface on his skin. He tried to rip the tail from his neck, but his attempts were futile, which means they were impossible, they weren't working. Fire erupted through the mountains, coming from the monster, illuminating the night and illuminating the mouth of the creature. He could see saliva dripping from its jagged teeth. The jaw fell down to the floor and burned through the rocks like acid, casting holes in their mysterious outside. As the creature raised its mighty, scaly tail, Hercules was lifted off his feet, hanging in the air by his neck. Panicked, Hercules could not catch breath. He raised his arms up over his head and pulled himself up, freeing his neck briefly. Air entered his lungs, took a large breath, tasting death in his tongue, feeling a sense of impending doom. He raised his arms up over his head and tried once again, but Hercules then bit down on the dragon hard. His teeth sunk into the tail. Pain erupted through his mouth. A burning sensation covered his lips and tongues, causing him to shout out. Somewhere in Athens, Eurystheus obviously sat with a smile upon his face, knowing the fate of Hercules, knowing that death was fast approaching. The image spurred anger into Hercules. He tore at the dragon's tail either side, knowing as his muscles bulged and his veins became visible, the tail ripped in half and Hercules was sent hurtling to the floor from a great height. But instead of giving up at this point, Hercules decided that he would have to keep fighting. He crashed to the floor, and the creature made out an awful sound. This time, it was not to ignite fear in Hercules, but instead as a response to the pain in his tail. More rocks began to shatter, his tail casting wild. Hercules could feel cracks in the edge of the mountain cliff beside him. He grabbed onto the rocks at part of the mountain and went sailing down the side. The sound of hard, heavy footsteps followed him. The vibrations of each thud, thud, thud caused more rocks to crack. Hercules went flying down. He was sliding off the edges. The speed of the rocks increased, bringing Hercules with him. The sound of the creature began to echo from a distance. He could no longer feel the heavy heat of its fiery breath in his neck. The sensation of each thud was no longer tearing heavily on his heart, or the pain of burning his mouth stopped. Hercules could not see in the darkness, but he could feel trees all around him, so he must be near to the base of the mountain. Desperately, he tried to grab the branches to slow himself down, to stop himself from sliding down the hill. Hercules failed. As he came hurtling down the mountain, he finally came soaring off the edge and into a river. He was submerged into the water. The water was ice cold, and water filled his throat, freezing him from the inside, his skin turning blue as he began to rise back up to the surface. By a show of hands, who thinks Hercules is going to live? Just in most of you. By the time Hercules had swum to the shore, he was exhausted. He staggered the entire distance from the mountain to Athens and collapsed at the feet of the king. The king was furious, but he was hopeful that Hercules would still not survive. He was covered from head to toe in cuts and grazes. Although some of the dirt and mud had been cleaned from his wounds, he fell into the river. The king could see the cuts were deep. His mouth was red from burning, and his wet, pale skin shivered as he lay on the floor.